And the IPCC report in August was a wake-up call for all of us. It made clear that the lights are flashing red on the climate dashboard. And we know what we need to do, because 6 years ago in Paris, we agreed our shared goals. We said we would protect people and nature from the effects of climate change. We said we would get finance flowing to climate action. And we said we would limit the rise in global temperature to well below 2 degrees, pursuing efforts towards 1.5. So let's come together over these 2 weeks and ensure that where Paris promised, Glasgow delivers.
We must acknowledge no nation has completed its development because no advanced nation is yet sustainable. All have a journey still to compete, so that all nations have a good standard of living and a modest footprint. In my lifetime, I've witnessed a terrible decline. In yours, you could and should witness a wonderful recovery. That desperate hope, ladies and gentlemen, delegates, excellency, is why the world is looking to you.
The pandemic has taught us that national solutions to global problems do not work. Failure to provide the critical finance and that of loss and damage is measured, my friends, in lives and livelihoods in our communities. This is immoral and it is unjust.
Well, this pledge by the US, the UK, France, Germany and the EU to assist South Africa in its plans to move away from fossil fuel reliance is being seen as the first of its kind, an agreement called the Just Energy Transition Partnership that will see South Africa receive $8.5 billion in loans and grants over the next 5 years.
Bold action must start with accelerated decarbonisation of our energy systems. Through this partnership, an initial amount of $8.5 billion will be mobilized over the next 3 to 5 years to support South Africa's just transition.
But it's clear with these resources now, the South African government does not have an excuse to ensure that there is a just transition for workers in that various coal mining industries to be able to transition to clean energy jobs.
Well, I think that the important place to start is to say that at this point in time, what we have on the table from the developed countries is an offer of financial support for our just transition. It's important to say that Eskom has estimated that their transition would probably cost about 4 times what is on the table.
We are disappointed that the developed countries have not delivered on the 100 billion.
The truth is, the small price of coal is really a big lie.
Today, I think we can say that the end of coal is in sight. That today, we're able to say that we're choking off international coal financing, or that we would see a shift away from domestic coal power.
So for oil and gas companies, which is a relatively small part of our balance sheet, we will only work with companies that have a credible transition plan to net zero. We've also committed to the fact that we are, not going to lend any more money to coal, and we're going to phase out our lending to coal as well.
Right now, as we sit comfortably here in this conference center in Glasgow, over 2 million of my fellow Kenyans are facing climate-related starvation.
Historically, Africa is responsible for only 3% of global emissions, and yet Africans are suffering some of the most brutal impacts fueled by the climate crisis.
The connection between climate change, poverty, inequality, and human well-being is increasingly visible. Unchecked, climate change will push more than 130 million people into poverty over the next 10 years, undoing hard-won development gains.
We are living in a broken world that has systemically marginalized women and girls, especially women and girls from vulnerable communities.
Cyclones in southern Africa claimed over 1,000 lives and caused damage of over $2 billion from Mozambique to Malawi and Zimbabwe. Droughts in East Africa dried up crops. Desert locusts destroy food production on 1 million hectares. Floods in East Africa claimed 430 lives and affected more than 700,000 people. Across the Sahel, desertification and erosion pose great risks. Africa loses $7 to $15 billion a year due to climate change, which could rise to $50 billion a year by 2040. The continent will need $336 billion to adapt to climate change. And this does not include several billion dollars needed to recover from the COVID-19 pandemic. The African Development Bank and the Global Center for Adaptation have launched the African Adaptation Acceleration Program. Our target is to mobilize $25 billion for climate adaptation.
And then we started to see a few cracks around the language with coal. So we saw China, we saw India, we saw South Africa all raise issues around that language of phasing out of unabated coal and also around getting rid of subsidies for fossil fuels. And in the end, what happened was India put forward an argument with China that they changed the language from phase out of unabated coal to phase down unabated coal.
May I just say to all delegates, I apologize for the way this process has unfolded, and I'm deeply sorry. I also understand the deep disappointment. But I think, as you have noted, it's also vital that we protect this package.
The approved texts are a compromise. They reflect the interests, the conditions, the contradictions, and the state of political will in the world today. The collective political will was not enough to overcome some deep contradictions. It's time to go into emergency mode, or our chance of reaching net zero will itself be zero. COP27 starts now.